This video is part 2 of 3 of the topic Human Population Dynamics and Resource Consumption. Previously, we talked about how the human population has grown very rapidly over the past several hundred years and introduced some of the impact that's having on the environment in terms of overexploitation of animals and other resources like lumber, damage to the environment from farming unsustainably. Today we'll kind of lump these together in this topic, and we'll talk about something called your ecological footprint. You'll be assigned an activity in a little while to calculate your own ecological footprint. So what is your ecological footprint? Well, you can see from this illustration, your footprint is your impact on the environment, right? You step on some grass, you leave an imprint or an impact there. And so it's looking at your use of resources and comparing that to the waste that you produce, right? So both those things. Why is this not working? There we go. Resources that are being used and waste you're producing. So let's give a formal definition of this. Ecological footprint is a measurement of how quickly you use resources and generate waste, compared to how quickly the environment can replace those resources you've used and break down your waste. So it's looking at this balance. So even if you're using a lot, if the environment is able to maintain that, that's okay. It's just that if you exceed what the environment's able to do, that's where we can becomes a problem situation. And it's looking at our usage of resources like food items, lumber we talked about, land itself, energy resources, and then again the ability to absorb that waste and break it down and to replace what we've used. I'll provide access to each of these links that are found in these PowerPoints so that you can go ahead and just click on them rather than typing them in. But this is kind of an interesting website that allows you to go through and look at each different country around the world and look at their ecological footprint, compare it now to a number of years ago, compare it to the ability of that environment to support those individuals, and you'll kind of be able to find out which countries have the highest footprints. I'll tell you right here that the United States is amongst the highest footprint. We use so many resources. Luckily, our country is blessed with a lot of good natural resources, but still, we use a lot, like way more than most countries per person. There might be one or two countries that exceed us, but we're very up there in terms of our ecological footprint. And another way of looking at it is if everyone in the world lived like the average American, we would need 5 planets worth of resources to support us. So that shows us that the current American lifestyle is not sustainable. It can't be done by everybody because we only have one planet. You can see a couple other high-ranking countries in terms of usage and footprints are Australia, South Korea, Russia, Germany, and others. If we look currently at the worldwide average, not just the countries listed here, you'll see that we're currently using 1.7 planets worth of resources. That's not sustainable, right? We only have one planet, so we're using more than we're making. It's like if you have a job that pays $1,000 a week, but your bills are $1,500 a week, you can only go in deficit so long before, the bank comes after your house. And then, all those kind of bad things happen. Same thing was true with the world. And the United States, again, is a big culprit. We're only about 5% of the total population of the world, but we use 25%, 1/4 of all of the minerals and energy that is collected and gathered for all of the people on the planet. So we're huge consumers. We also produce a lot of waste. And I'm hoping that, this generation is more eco-conscious, and we're going to start to change this number, not be here on the top, which is one ranking we don't want to have for ecological footprint. So in your upcoming assignment, you'll be asked to go to this website, www.footprintcalculator.org, and calculate your own personal ecological footprint, and then think about some things that you can do to help reduce your impact. So an assignment with this will be forthcoming. I want to talk a little bit about recycling. I'm going to show you guys this short video dealing with how glass is recycled. So we'll go ahead, advance to the next slide, and play this video.
In the old days, recycling glass meant turning it into this. Glass was recycled into what they called aggregate, which was used to cover landfills. Basically, the glass was turned back into sand. But today, because of technological advancements, more glass can be recycled back into glass.
The technology today allows us to sort glass in ways that would not be economical to do manually. The first step is to remove small metal objects that are in there with a magnet. After going through that process, the material will go to a eddy current, essentially a reverse magnet, which will charge any non-ferrous metals in there, aluminum, bits of copper, and so on, with an electric charge, and those non-ferrous metals are then ejected from the stream. We then go to a series of optical sorters. The optical sorters are identifying the glass by color, ejecting the clear glass with air jets. What's remaining are clear glasses conveyed into a bunker, stored there until it's loaded into trucks to be shipped to glass bottle manufacturers.
We just can't get enough glass. We use approximately 150 tons of recycled glass daily, and we will use that to make new bottles. So we receive that recycled glass, and it is mixed as you would mix a cake. It goes into a very large furnace, heated at 2,700 degrees, and turns into a molten glass. That molten glass is cured through a process and then is delivered to our forming machines. You will see that glass being cut into drops or gobs, and it is formed immediately into a glass container. It will go out on a conveyor, going through an oven, go through a lengthy inspection process automatically. The beauty of recycling is that if you purchase on the streets of New York, for example, a Snapple bottle, when turned back into a recycling bin, we'll make another Snapple bottle.
So that video was to introduce this concept called the hierarchy of sustainability. What is a hierarchy? Well, a hierarchy is an ordered sequence from most important to least important, biggest to smallest, best to worst. In this case, best to worst is the most appropriate descriptor of this hierarchy of sustainability. So you can see that recycling down here is number 3. Is actually not the most sustainable option. It's better than throwing things away, right? Disposal down here, that's the worst option of all. But there are 2 options that are better than recycling. So we'll explain why this is, and maybe reflect back on that video while I'm talking here and think about, what are some things that were going on in that video that might make it so that recycling is not as sustainable as reducing or reusing. And you may also have heard of this adage, reduce, reuse, recycle. What will be better said, reduce, reuse, then recycle, reflecting this hierarchy where recycling is not on equal footing in terms of the most sustainable options. So thinking about that video, what is it that recycling requires? Well, recycling uses a lot of energy, right? You've got to actually collect the recyclables. You've got to melt them down in this case, sort them, reform things, clean it, resend it out, inspect it. Even though we're recycling the materials, we're using lots of energy to do so. And so rather than recycling, if you can reuse something, that's a better option. So that maybe you can refill a I don't know, a milk bottle. Nowadays, they actually have milk delivery services that are back in vogue, I guess you could say, that will deliver glass bottles. You use them, you put them back out, they'll pick them back up, and they'll reuse them rather than recycling, or kind of repurposing something where you could, instead of, buying a new water bottle each day from the vending machine, you could refill it from the filtered water fountain nearby and just reuse that water bottle over and over again. So reusing is better than recycling. And even better than that is reducing. Reducing is the best option. So instead of buying that bottled water at all, just go to the water fountain or invest in a reusable water bottle that you can then refill an infinite number of times, and so you don't have to have all this waste that's being produced. Maybe you go out to eat a lot. Instead, start packing some lunches so you have less paper waste and eat less meat. That's less waste in terms of the energy used to actually create that burger or whatever it is you're eating. So reducing is the best option of all. Maybe not getting a new cell phone every 6 months or a year, go a little bit longer. And so you want to think about that: reduce, reuse, then recycle. Fortunately, most of the things we have nowadays can be recycled unless they are like soiled. So if you have pizza boxes, for example, that are really greasy, you actually can't recycle the greasy parts of that cardboard. If you try to, it'll contaminate batches and it won't be a good thing. You also can't recycle like plastic grocery bags in the regular recycling. You have to put them in a special spot. A variety of other things can't be recycled. And unfortunately, with China rejecting a bunch of our recycling now, a lot of the recyclables are just being burned or put in dumps. And we're trying to figure out how we can change this, because it's not profitable for us to recycle in some cases, and it's causing a big crisis. Excuse me. In addition to reducing our consumption of these materials, we also want to use less energy, water as well. These are actually not serious suggestions here, save water, shower with a friend, and the whole energy thing there, and flushing the toilet. But they kind of drive home the point that we want to try to conserve all of these resources as much as possible. And so if you can't think of any, I want you to research or brainstorm some ways you can save energy or save water that are realistic, that you might actually expect to do to help out with the environmental situation. So lastly, what else can be done? Well, on a broader scale, we'll talk briefly here about thinking about where our electrical power comes from. So this is from 2017. It's the most recent data I could find in this nice graphic format. And you can see that if I do some quick math here, 14 plus 37 plus 80% of our energy in the United States comes from burning fossil fuels, even to this day. It's really very sad that we still haven't made that much progress. 9% comes from nuclear energy, which creates hazardous waste products of its own that are dangerous to the environment. Not so much, fossil fuel emissions, but things like radioactive waste that stay dangerous for thousands and maybe even millions of years. And then 11% of our energy comes from what we call renewable energy sources. Of these renewable sources, they aren't all equal. This biomass is still burning stuff, and so we're releasing carbon dioxide into the air, so that's not wonderful. But the other half, approximately, geothermal, solar, wind, and hydroelectric. So that means about 5 or 6%, we'll say 6% of our energy coming from these. Those are probably the best options. They have minimal environmental impact. They're still not perfect. For example, hydroelectric is where you build a dam and you allow the water then to flow down over that dam. It spins a turbine to generate electricity. Well, the dams can really mess up the ecosystem, and if there's some fish that need to swim past where that dam is, they can't do that anymore. Wind power. These turbines can kill many birds and interfere with migration of bats and their sonar. Bat sonar and migration of other organisms. Solar takes up a lot of space. Geothermal is just not appropriate for every situation. But anyway, if we can start to move towards renewable energy sources, that would be wonderful, and would be a great boon for the environment overall.